So now we're going to have 10 minutes for questions, for a moderated discussion with the panelists. The questions that I'm going to be asking are to all of the panelists. I'd like to begin with, every one of you spoke about the great challenges that already exist today in your respective countries in the prisons in terms of overcrowding, harsh detention laws. And you've done a really good job of shedding light on how COVID has really kind of pushed all of these existing problems into the breaking point. But I'd like to ask you if you think there are any opportunities in your work, whether it be advocacy or in your dealings with the government or in your campaigning with the public, has there been any opportunities that the COVID crisis has brought to your work? For instance, has it sparked any discussions? Has it allowed your public advocacy to become more effective? Because now everybody understands to some extent what it's like, not to be in a prison, but to be at home and not be able to leave. So I'm interested to know if COVID has impacted your work by opening certain doors in any way possible. Yes, Yusuf.
Yeah, can I go on, or is anybody who's going?
Désolé,
Okay.
désolé. Je voulais dire que nous avons saisi justement cette expérience, ce parcours du Covid pour commander une étude par rapport aux attitudes justement du gouvernement marocain par rapport à la question du Covid. Parce que nous avons constaté que les premiers jours de la pandémie, ça a été marqué par la production d'une loi qui incrimine le manquement à l'interdiction, ou plutôt justement à l'interdiction, ou plutôt au respect du confinement. Du 20 mars, de la date de cette interdiction, au 21 mai, il y a eu 81 000 arrestations. C'était l'occasion de se poser la question, jusqu'à quand l'État devrait s'arroger le droit de maintenir l'ordre en absence de faire participer la société civile. Remarquons que la société civile pouvait jouer un rôle énorme dans la sensibilisation des gens à respecter le confinement. Donc, cette étude-là va nous permettre d'appuyer la revendication justement à faire appel davantage à la société civile. Voilà brièvement.
Great, thank you. Uju, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, I would. Like, I mean, sometimes people will wonder, how could such a thing that everybody felt this was a big danger for the whole world, how could something good come out of it? Funny enough, that's actually what happened. For example, on the 31st of July, 2019, Nigeria had the law, which is Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019, which was signed by the president. One critical thing about that law, there are a lot of beautiful things in that law, but one critical thing is the fact that he then enshrined the non-custodial measure, because by making the Nigerian Correctional Service, which is changed its name from Nigerian Police Service to Nigerian Correctional Service, but then to have non-custodial arm of that. Do you know that whilst it was difficult for many of the states to effectively start implementing non-custodial measures during the lockdown, because of the fact that the custodial services were closed, the courts, everybody was saying, make sure you don't have anybody getting into custodial service center because of the fear that the social distancing could not be kept. Now, many of the states, we have 36 states plus the federal capital in Nigeria, many of the states establish regulations, and then those regulations, their sanctions, were many of them were non-custodial measures. So one good thing was the fast tracking of the implementation of non-custodial measures in all the states of the Federation of Nigeria, just because of what happened. In a state like in the Federal Capital Territory, for example, within that period, over 22,000 persons were supervised on community service. So apart from fast-tracking the implementation of non-custodial measure, we started seeing the need to introduce things like virtual visits, because if you can't have families visits, can they also try and do that online? We started talking about issue about virtual courts. Then we started also talking about issue about doing a lot of training online, trainings that we were not able to do before. So all the non-custodial officers, we were now having training with them every week throughout from the last week of April 2020 to date. And then it started opening opportunities for us to also see other things like having telecounseling on the phone for ex-prisoners and all that. So there were some good things that came out of it. But what we are saying are those lessons we've learned, can we retain them? Can we sustain them? So please, can we continue to use more of non-custodial measures and don't just get people to put in prisons? And of course, there were some releases that happened. So those releases need to be sustained. That's what we're saying. So there were good lessons that came out of it.
Thank you. Yeah. We've got 3 minutes left. So we're only going to go for just one question. So Teresa, would you like to say it? I'm sorry, you'll have to keep it a bit short. Go ahead,
very quickly. Yeah, very quickly, what I'd like to add to what Yusuf and Uju have stated, because those very same benefits, we've also gotten to experience them and are continuing to thrive in those changes, is now the speeding of cases, because now cases can be had for those who are being held in remand. They can attend their court cases via Zoom. And so it's speeding up cases being had, and a lot of people being released who would have been held for such long times. But indeed, I think the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the advocacy work we've been doing, saying that petty offenders should not be held in prisons, and that we're taking everyone into prisons. They're overcrowded. And because the pandemic requires that there's social distancing, which wasn't possible with the overcrowding. As Uju has stated, it's my sincere hope that we are going to keep petty offenders, people who are on survival crimes, outside custodial sentences. But as I said in my presentation, it's very unfortunate that we are having the very poor, vulnerable, marginalized being imprisoned due to COVID-19, flaunting COVID-19 rules. So we need to hold our criminal justice system and our government accountable. We really need to.
Great. Ms. Alves, would you like to add something? You have 2 minutes.
Vou falar. Com o Covid-19, se ampliou muito mais as violações, né? Por conta das mortes, a dificuldade dos familiares. Então, se percebe que com esse vírus, as pessoas, principalmente aqui no Brasil e São Paulo, nós da Ampará, conseguimos fazer uma rede de solidariedade às pessoas, conseguimos fazer, como não poderia ser atendimento presencial, mas sim, conseguimos fazer audiências públicas com parlamentares, com promotoria, com a Defensoria Pública, e o que aconteceu de bom com o Covid-19 foi alguns HCs que nós conseguimos para as mulheres, né, grávidas e lactantes, e outras pessoas em situação de risco dentro do sistema prisional. Obrigada.
Great. Thank you so much for those answers. I always like thinking about, I always believe fundamentally that some of the greatest challenges actually provides greatest opportunities, because it's just that pressure forces us as human rights defenders to really think, and it focuses our concentration, and we sometimes come up with the best solutions. And sometimes the worst of times are the times that actually make people outside of prisons actually care about prisons. Something that they don't really think about on a day-to-day level, not like we do with the work that we do. So I think COVID has been a really interesting teacher for all of us. So thank you for elaborating on that. Now we'd go to the question and answers for all the people, the participants that have been waiting patiently and listening to us. So the first question that has come to us, I am sorry, scroll down. So yes, the first question comes, it says, what collaborations or networks do you recommend for organizations working on re-entry across the world to connect and share practices as well as support each other? And I'd like to combine this question with another one, which is related, which also, it's from Clement Okesh, which says, how can non-state actors work more towards providing reintegration services, even for pretrial detainees, given that they too suffer stigma and rejection and stay very long in custody? Does that make sense? The second question is basically, what can non-state actors do, or how can they collaborate concerning best practices, and who is doing it well, and what can the UN do? Who would like to answer first from our panelists? Yes, Yusuf. Please go. Yusuf, would you like to answer first? You have to unmute your mic.
C'est bon, c'est bon. J'en profite pour lancer un appel au mécanisme onusien. Essentiellement la Commission pour la prévention du crime et la justice pénale, le Comité contre la torture, le sous-comité pour la prévention de la torture et autres peines au traitement cruel. Parce que la question de la détention préventive n'est seulement pas une question politique, elle est également une question de droit. Il ne faut pas perdre de vue que le traitement réservé aux prévenus soulève des problèmes particuliers, notamment lorsque une autre autorité que l'administration pénitentiaire se charge de leur dossier. Et je nomme le parquet. Au Maroc, c'est le parquet qui se charge de la gestion des dossiers des prévenus. Alors, je vous laisse imaginer un petit peu toutes les complications qui s'en découlent, comme par exemple la privation de toute formation, de tout programme d'intégration, et même les soins ne sont pas du sort de l'administration. C'est le parquet qui s'en charge. Alors, ça fait une discrimination très, très grave qui engendre pas mal de problèmes pour les prévenus. Et là, il y a besoin d'intervention de ces mécanismes, parce que c'est en protégeant les droits des prévenus qu'on peut mettre en relief leur situation, entre guillemets, je dirais, arbitraire. Merci.
Thank you, Yusuf. Would anyone else on the panel like to respond?
Can I just say some few words?
Yes, go ahead, Uju.
Okay, just very quickly, I think it's still the whole word about partnership with government institutions, partnership with private sector, partnership with other voluntary sector. And I believe that one of the critical things we must begin to look at is having, because when you talk about reentry, it needs to come from different angles. So what are those things, the status of the things that actually increase the risk of offending for these persons, and how can we begin to engage with the families, because sometimes it is the fact that the families will not receive them, then they move to antisocial associates who will then receive them. So we need to work with the families, we need to work with the environment, we need to work with the communities, we need to also ensure that the processes that we are providing, there is a connection between health and justice and social services, because many a time it is because of these gaps between these net issues around synergy between these things that make it very difficult. So I think that once we're able to do this, it will help. And I believe that some kind of platform that will engage those who are working in this area will also be very, very helpful. So non-state actors can actually work in those ways and strengthening what the government is doing, but also providing their expertise and professional input in trying to ensure that this is a holistic package to help those who are in need of this.
Thank you, Uju. Yaila, Ms. Alves, would you like to say something? Teresa, oh, Ms. Alves is going.
Sim, colocar assim, um fortalecimento de rede de mulheres, tanto de familiares e de mulheres que passaram pelo sistema prisional, para que haja um fortalecimento e um enfrentamento contra o desencarceramento em massa. E no Brasil, a atuação de defesa dos direitos humanos é feito quase completamente por organizações, né, da sociedade civil, que muitas vezes fazendo o papel do Estado. A importância do enfrentamento político em várias frentes contra o encarceramento em massa. Obrigada.
Thank you. Teresa, final last words?
Yeah, I think in addition to what my fellow panelists have said, is that, for instance, this December, we're celebrating the 10 years since the adoption of the Bangkok rules on how women should be treated in imprisonment. We need to really enforce these rules. They are there on how, we should treat and protect women human rights. We have the UN Tokyo rights on, alternatives to imprisonment. They are there, but they're not being implemented. The implementation is the problem. So how can we push our government and our criminal justice system to implement these rules and what we have agreed on? I think my final comment is around funding aftercare and transition back into society. It's a gap. And this is where depression, suicide, all manner of trouble breaks loose. You're taking people through a criminal justice system, and upon getting done with them when they're released from prison, we're leaving them on their own, alone, not helping them to, reintegrate back into society. Let's come together, fund reintegration, fund transition, and let these people have honest, genuine second chances in life. Thank you.
So we've come to the end. I would have liked to go to more questions, but we ran 6 minutes over. So we have to conclude. I would really like to thank all of the panelists, Teresa, Yusuf, Alves, Uju, for your wonderful presentations, and also just for the work that you do. As somebody, as myself, who started 12 years ago, basically going to prison for the very first time, it changed my life forever. I could never take that, what I'd seen out of, and I knew that my life was forever changed and I was going to spend the rest, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So to see you talk so powerfully about your journey in your countries and what you are doing to battle this and to bring change has been an absolute privilege. And I'm going to be leaving here having more respect, for not just for panelists, but for moderators. It is way harder than it looks. But also, I thank you for the inspiration that you've given me, and I'm sure to many others. I'd also like to take this time to thank all of the OSF people that have just done so much work behind the scenes to bring this to you seamlessly, the translators and the entire OSF team. You know who you are. Thank you so much for making this so easy and such a successful panel. Thank you, everybody. With that, I'd like to sign off. Bye-bye. Stay safe and stay healthy.